The South African Federation of Trade Unions has made a call for e-hailing drivers to organize and form under a trade union to fight what they say is an abuse of the drivers. SAFTU says the drivers bear most of the responsibility, from using the vehicles to maintaining them, to bring in huge profits for the app owners of the e-hailing services. They are calling for the owners of apps to take more responsibility as employers and to be subject to South Africa's labour laws. SAFTU's Secretary General Zwelinzima Vavi now joins us virtually. Mr. Vavi, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for it. Is it really possible to get these drivers to unionize, considering the argument that some e-hailing services have made to say that this is a partnership? They argue it is a B2B, even though they are providing services to customers, individual customers at that.
Well, thank you very much, Eldrin, for inviting us, and good morning to everybody listening to you. Can I just, in passing, just make a remark about your story covering the Democratic Alliance marching in Cape Town against the amendments to the employment equity legislation. And our view in rejecting that propaganda of the DA is that the DA knows that it is telling the citizens of the Western Cape, Cape Town, and the rest of the country a lie. They are now employing the old propaganda machinery to try and discredit any kind of transformation that is necessary to redress over 300 years of apartheid and colonialism in South Africa. As we speak, the white population occupies 62.9%. That's 63% of all senior management positions in South Africa. The march of the DA yesterday was about hoodwinking the unsuspecting black communities, working class communities in Cape Town, into protecting the current status quo where 63% of the whites still occupy all of the senior positions in the economy. That's not sustainable. That's not building a non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. That's prosperity for the few, and that is about continued, which is their march, is about maintaining the status quo in order to continue the subjugation of the great majority of South Africans who are yearning for a more equitable society, a more egalitarian society, and in order to close the chapter on the past apartheid and colonial practices. And I felt that I must just say that earlier.
I remember when Mzwanele Manye was still the head of GCIS, one of the issues that he had raised at the time was that he called in an over-concentration of colored people in the Western Cape. There was backlash to that. But the interpretation of this Amendment Act by some people is that the act would then force certain people, including colored people in this particular case, to move from the province where they are in the largest to other provinces to find work opportunities. What's your interpretation of that?
Firstly, we rejected Mzwanele Manye's intervention at that time as being crude and overly racist. You can't move people in South Africa from one spot and one province to another province on the basis that you want a more equitable society. That was just the way of playing right into the swart gevaar mongering that the DA is now advancing in the Western Cape. We rejected that. But also the interpretation, the interpretation that people will have to move so that South Africa is spread across all of the provinces racially, and so that the demographics of the Western Cape or Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal change, is just absolutely nonsense propaganda. There's no such a thing coming out of this bill. That's the first point. Equally, when John Steenhuisen lies with a straight face and tell the people who are marching there that they are going to lose their jobs and that over 600,000 people stand to lose their jobs, he knows that he is lying. The proposals are not in any way suggesting that people must be retrenched or must lose their jobs in order to realize racial equities or demographics of the country. There's no such a thing in that bill. He is lying, and he knows that he is spreading misinformation in order to gain support out of fear that is going to arise from the so-called colored communities and or white people and Indian minorities in the Western Cape and elsewhere in the country. There is no such a thing. It will be illegal to do so. It will be unconstitutional. You can't, when you're trying to redress 300 years of colonial exclusion and oppression, start to make mechanical maneuvers in order to address that by retrenching people in their existing jobs. We will oppose that. And the Constitutional Court will never agree to such a thing. There is no such a proposition in that bill about that in the first place. So if he goes to court with that misinformation, he is going to be laughed out of the court. He will be laughed out of the ILO. What he will be told is that the legislation seeks to put up targets, 5-year targets, that will be negotiated in each and every sector, not imposed by the minister, by the way, but will be negotiated in each and every sector to say, in our manufacturing, in our steel, in our mining, in our retail, or any other sector of the economy, these are the demographics that are applying at the national level, and this is what we are targeting to achieve over the period of 5 years. And in doing so, it won't be on the basis that you want to retrench people and or tell them that we are too many as white males in this particular sector, so we are sending you into unemployment. No. SAFTU's basic point is saying that we want employment equity. We want a more equitable society. We want more equal, egalitarian society. But we don't want that in unemployment. We don't want to have equity in unemployment crisis. We want black people to be lifted up so that they can compete for senior management positions. We want them to be skilled so that they can compete equally with their counterparts in South Africa. We want, in that fashion, to be able to build a truly non-racial society, not a rainbow society that is based on the current inequalities we inherited from the colonial era.
Okay, and then let's quickly speak about the e-hailing service and calling on them to unionize. And the point that I was making a bit earlier on is that these tech companies are arguing that it is a B2B contract, it's a business-to-business contract, and not necessarily business to employee or business to customer contract that they've signed with these drivers, and therefore they can't be considered employees.
No, they are employees. And we meeting the Minister of Labour tomorrow morning to argue that actually the e-hailing drivers are employees. They are not independent contractors. They are employed through them joining the app of these multinational corporations that are operating in South Africa, Uber, Bolt, and Mr. Delivery. They are forced to buy their own working tools in the form of the cars, which they pay for themselves, which they service, which they fix their mechanical problem, which they pour fuel, and to which they pay toll gates. And yet these companies are taking over 30% of that small change in a context where they are suppressing the fares of the e-hailing in order to outcompete and in the process wipe out all of the taxi industry in South Africa. We are opposed to that. We want a coexistence between the e-hailing. We want e-hailing drivers to be recognized as employees. We want the taxi associations to register their own drivers so that they can be registered as employees. Mm-hmm. Both e-hailing and taxi drivers must have access to the protections of the Constitution, such as the right to fair labor standards, as well as to have deductions for unemployment insurance, so that when they lose their jobs, they are not left wanting in the streets as it is currently the situation.
Why not take this matter straight to court and have the court deal with it? A court in New Zealand, for instance, had found, as you now just argued, that Uber drivers are employees. The court found that as Uber sets the rates, collected the money, paid, and thereafter paid the drivers a certain amount, the drivers were in fact not operating their own businesses, but rather instead working for Uber's business. So why not take it to court? There's a precedent that has already been set in New Zealand.
In fact, we've done so through our union called NUPSU in the Western Cape. They took up a case of a single Uber driver to the CCMA and argued that the Uber was an employer of this driver who have terminated the employment relationship without any fair hearing as demanded by the Labour Relations Act and other pieces of legislation in the country. And the CCMA commissioner agreed that indeed he has a jurisdiction to rule over the dispute, in that Uber was actually the employer and the driver was actually the employee. That's a major breakthrough for us in South Africa. It's a pity that the matter went to, of course, appealed to by Uber. And on a technicality, the Labour Court ruled that no, the union and the employer have cited a wrong employer, in that they cited Uber in London instead of Uber in South Africa as the employer. On that basis of that technicality alone, they dismissed the case. We are going back to that case. We will take it on appeal, and if the time have lapsed to the extent that we are unable to do so, we will take any other case of dismissal, because you know how they dismiss the workers in this Ehailing. They just block you from accessing the application, and you are out of the game as soon as they do that. There are many people that they've excluded now, so we are going to be taking their cases up in the CCMA, back to the Labour Court, into the Appeals Court, and into the Constitution. There's just no way that the Constitutional Court will agree that these are not workers, and or that the EPWP workers who have been working in the system since 2009 are not workers,
all right,
and that all the taxi drivers are not workers.
Thank you so much for your time.